Excited to get to be with you guys. Like Bill said, guys, we're not experts in this. I mean, we really are. We are constantly learning, constantly tweaking, and even when we started this thing, we started by just trying to learn from others. So got the chance to learn from Bill Wellens, went to Summit Church in North Carolina to spend a day with Mike McDaniels, who leads their residency, and got on the phone, talked to guys in Sin Cities, and just said, hey, tell us what y'all are doing. So really, we started this doing the exact same thing y'all are doing. Just, hey, we just want to learn. We want to find out how you guys are doing this. So we're not experts. We're fellow travelers with you. So I am going to talk about the nuts and bolts side of things. And I've got 5 things that I'm going to share with you. Bill had 10. I've got 5 because I don't know half of what he does. So we're going to go 5, just some practical things to cover. First thing that I want to talk just practically about is curriculum. So when it comes to starting a church planting residency, what do you teach these guys? What is it that you're actually pouring into them? And the Russellville guys were asking a great question a minute ago. Are you teaching theology in this? Bill brought up a moment ago. How do you deal with pastoral stuff? Are you teaching them just pastorally how to go and care for the sick? So this is a difficult question here. And one thing that has helped me just in thinking through all this is a progression that this is leadership pipeline stuff. So those of you that have been in the cohort, the Sending Church cohort, you guys are thinking a lot about this. But something that I think helps, this is a modification of something that J.D. Greer's church has used, but I'm going to use some different language. But if you think about, somebody right at the very beginning in your church being a servant, so somebody becomes a believer, they're brand new in your church, they're passionate, they begin to serve in the church. Somewhere in there they start saying, you know what, I might have a call to ministry, I don't know. So they start exploring some of that. Then they start, learning how to be a minister, and that could be lay. They're learning things on how to really disciple people. Somewhere along the way, they feel a specific calling to become a pastor. And that's the specific calling to ministry. They may not be a lead pastor yet, but they feel called to be a pastor. And that's where they're, hopefully in this area right here, that's where they're learning theology. That's where they're learning pastoral care. Here was the thing that helped me so much. And I heard this different language, both from Bill Wellens and Mike McDaniels at Summit in North Carolina. A church planter is a specialized type of pastor. Bill Wellens uses the phrase that their residency is a finishing school. So this is somebody who, for them, they would say, already knows how to pastor. So for us, when we're recruiting, our hope is that these guys already have some pastoral experience. Now, as Bill said, if they don't, that's not a 100% automatic disqualifier for us. If we feel like a guy's got a calling on his life and an anointing on his life, we'll scrap all that, because we know that God can take care of that. But as you think about your leadership pipeline, as you think about development, as you think about other components that you're putting in place, ideally, you're going to have somebody that either from outside or growing up within your church has learned a lot of these things. And so now in the residency piece, you're teaching them this. You're teaching them the specific nuts and bolts of how to be a church planter. So that's just kind of some overview. But what we've done, and I would say, several of ours haven't had this experience. So because of that, we're teaching other components, and we want to also teach them kind of our DNA. And so the DNA of what we believe a church should be, the DNA of the Summit. They're coming through the Summit residency because they believe in some way in who we are and what we're doing, and so that'd be the same for you. So as you think about it, you're thinking about, how do you prepare them to plant a church? So there's just a lot of components of what you want to teach somebody. So rather than kind of go through, a bunch of it, I just printed this off for you. So on your table, this is basically 40,000 foot view of our residency. And I can send you guys the digital, if you'll remind me, I'll send you a digital version of this that you can forward to all these guys. I'm not going to read through all this, but I do want you to see the big picture of it, because curriculum-wise, there's really three buckets, kind of three big picture categories of what we're trying to train these guys in. And you can see it in the top there of Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3. And I'll talk about pre-entry and assessment later as we talk about recruiting. But Phase 1, we're really focusing on developing the planter and helping them craft and develop the vision. So, Bill, in that early phase, we spend the first 2 entire sessions just talking about being a present-centered church. So a lot of that is just we are pouring into them DNA. When Bill said the one thing that he would asterisk of the spiritual component, man, we are front-loading that spiritual component because we want to get at their heart. We want to know what's going on. One of the things that's happening early on for us is we are peeling back the onion. We're pulling back the layers because, as Bill said, if there is an underlying issue in their marriage, in their heart, something that's going on in them, when they get to the field and they're planting, it is going to come out. We would rather uncover it in the first phase of the residency and have time to deal with it before we send them out, and then 2 years later something pops up in their marriage and the enemy uses that to take them down. So in the first phase, there's a lot that is present-centered, who you are, wine and wineskins. There's a lot about the DNA of the summit. There's also the piece of self-awareness, helping them uncover what's going on in their own soul. And then at the beginning, we're also helping them begin to craft the vision of their church. So we're talking about the very foundational elements of vision and God's specific calling on you as a church planter. So what's specific to you? What's specific to why did God call you to the city He called you to? So the early on piece, there's a lot of it where we're dealing with their specific calling, the vision that God's given them for their church. So in the top section, in Phase 1 and Phase 2, you can see Send Network training sessions. So Send Network, as Bill said, it's the Multiply training. Now they've rebranded it. It's called Send Network now. It is 11 sessions, 12 topics, 11 sessions. No idea why they won't just go ahead and develop a 12th session, but they have 12 topics, 11 sessions. Bill, he said it, and it's so true. It is great curriculum. Because what it's going to do is it's going to force them to wrestle with the issues that they need to wrestle with, and it is very hands-on. The great thing about the Send Network training is it is cohort style. They're working things out, and then they bring it into the group, and you discuss what they're working on. So it's not just information dump on them. It forces them to wrestle with, what is your discipleship model going to be? What is your strategy for evangelism going to be? What's your philosophy on leadership and elders and church government and structure? What are you going to do? How are you going to organize that? So it's forcing them to do that. So the Send Network training, as you can see on here, it's probably a third of what we do. So if you take the whole year, you look at all the things we cover, Send Network is about a third of what we do. And it's really good curriculum. Tim can get you hooked up if you want to. It's kind of this secret society. Somebody who's in it has to nominate you to go. So Tim can help you guys get hooked up with doing that. So you can see there, that's the first phase. Second phase, we're really helping them develop the plan and understand their context. So in that second phase, there's a lot of work on demographics of their city. Really getting to know, getting to learn what's happening in their city, helping them understand that, and then help them really develop out their plan. So in this first 2 phases, and you can see, we really kind of have, it's set up now to where we finish the Send network as early as we can. And one of the reasons that we do that is because all of the components of Send network training are helping them develop a prospectus. So if you don't know what a prospectus is, it's your little booklet that you use to fundraise that has all the components of your vision and your plan and your timeline and all those things. It's what I heard somebody call one time the plop piece. It's the piece that you can plop down in front of somebody, and it explains to them everything you want to see happen, and hopefully explains it to them in a compelling enough way that they want to give money to it, or they want to join you, or they want to be a partner in some way. So one of the things that we hope is happening in that first 2 phases is that they, by the end of that, have enough under the hood and enough developed to where they can put together that print piece that they're going to use for vision casting and fundraising. And I'm going to get to cost here in a minute, but one of the things we do for our guys is we pay for the printing of those materials for them. We say, hey, we don't want that burden on you. We want you to be able to fundraise and not have to pay to fundraise. So we're going to help provide, the print material for you. So phase 1, the planter and the vision. Phase 2, developing the plan, understanding the context. And then phase 3, this is really important. Some of you guys may know my story. I came to Summit 14 years ago. 2.5, 3 years into that, 2 of us from Summit went and planted a church in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And 3 years into that plant, the other guy stayed and I came back. And that church has actually now planted 2 other churches out of it, and just phenomenal church. But we planted that church in a movie theater. God blessed. It grew. It was awesome. We got up to like 150 people in the first year, and then we just plateaued. And I vividly remember the moment where the 2 of us sat down with Tim Smith, and Tim looked at us, and we're stuck, and we don't know what to do, and we're like pouring our hearts out to him, and he looks back at us, and he goes, so basically what you 2 guys are telling me is, you know how to plant a church, you just don't know how to grow one. And we went, yeah, pretty much. We have no clue what to do next. So we want to equip these guys to know, how do you plant a church, but then what do you do past launch Sunday? Like, what do you do? Because as one of our guys said, planting a church is like Waffle House. When you open it up that first Sunday, you can throw away the key because Sunday comes every 7 days after that. So you got to keep going with it. So we want to help them know, how do you prepare for long-range growth? And so this is where, we walk them through our annual planning process to help them understand that. We're walking them through, basically, this is how we do everything we do. So we walk them through our equipping strategy, our small group strategy, our membership and growth track process, our family ministry. So this is basically where they're hearing from us and from different people on our staff. This is the way that we do everything we do, because we want them to have a plan in place for beyond that first Sunday. So what do you do once you've got the people there? So that's just big picture. If you guys have specific questions about content later, would love to talk through that. So that's kind of the curriculum piece. 2 other things that I would say about curriculum. One is, Tim said this earlier, I really think that it's good to think through what experientially do you want them to do. So not just knowledge dump, but again, the NAM stuff's going to force them to work on stuff. But one of the ideas that we've talked about in this next year is, do we want every single one of our residencies to have to pull off a block party? So that they at least have done that, so they don't get out on the field and go, how do I even do that? Do we want them to have to pull off a block party? When I called the Send City guy in Seattle several years ago and said, hey, tell me what we should know about residents, here was the one thing he said. He said, force them to share the gospel. Because he said, we have church planters who are getting on the field and don't know how to do one-on-one evangelism. He said, so require them in some way to share the gospel, even if that's just reporting, even if it's building into their schedule 4 hours a week, they have to go sit at a coffee shop or a public space and build a relationship with somebody. So think experiences, not just knowledge in that. And then second thing that I would say is let them hear from people on the field. Some of the greatest moments. Bill brought Dave, his son, in this last fall, and Dave spent a day with them. When they get a chance to hear from a planter on the field, it just means more. Honestly, it means more than it does coming from us. Somebody on the front line. So, you can do that over Skype. You can do that. I remember a couple of years ago, several times, I'd Skype a church planter in at the end of our day and say, hey, we just spent a day talking about, how do you plan your week out, time management, all these components. Tell us what you're struggling with. And you got a guy saying, hey, I'm 3 years in and I'm still the only staff member. So part of my struggle is loneliness and, being stuck by myself all the time. I'm struggling. And he just talked through the practical pieces of it. And it was so good, And then, at the end of that, you send that church planter a $25 Amazon gift card. Just, hey, thanks for your time. We just want to bless you. Thanks for investing in our guys. And it's huge for them. So let them hear from people on the field. So most important thing you can know about curriculum, and then I'll wrap up the curriculum piece. You will change it every year. So here's the thing that we were told that has been 100% true. What you're doing is you are building a library of training materials. So when you teach something, keep incredible notes, develop all of it. The next year, you'll make it better. Or you may come to the next year and you may say, you know what? With the 5 guys that we've got this year, we don't need to do that session. These guys all need more on elders. These guys all need more on fundraising. So instead of doing 1 session on fundraising, we're going to do 3 sessions on fundraising. So you're building a library of materials that you can pull from. But just know, based on the guys and based on the situations, you're probably going to change it. You're going to change it every year. So just start and do it. So that's the curriculum piece. Second one is model. So what's your model of training and what's the model of your residency going to be? And by model, here's what I mean. Are these guys coming on your staff? Are these guys lay people? Are you going to meet 1 day a week? Are they going to? There's all different ways to do this. I'm going to give you three different models because I think they kind of represent all the spectrums, and then you can kind of tailor in between. So model number 1 would be full-time staff. So model number 1, bringing church planters full-time on your staff for 9 months or for a year. Our first 3 years, really, we had 2 full-time guys on our staff for 9 months. They would be in all of our meetings. They'd be in our weekly staff prayer meetings. They're working on their materials. And then 1 day a week, we would have training all day. So a 1 day a week training model where we're spending the whole day investing in them, pouring into them. And then the rest of the week, they're either learning from our other staff or they are out reaching people. If they're within driving distance, they're out meeting with people. Or possibly we've even had guys that had already planted. So they were 6 months into their plant, year into their plant, coming into our residency. So they're with us, a couple of days a week, but then the rest of the time they're in their city. So full-time on our staff. I'll talk about the cost related to that in just a minute. The benefit of the full-time on your staff, you guys know the downside to the full-time on your staff. It's the most expensive, okay? We'll get to that in a second. But the benefit to the full-time on your staff is, 1, it gives them the ability to just do that. They're not having to work another job. They're not having to do all these other things. They can just do that. But it also gives you the greatest chance to pour DNA into them and for them to really get the culture. We had a guy, I think he was our second year, who we were in our staff prayer time. I mean, our staff every single Tuesday spends the first, hour of our day praying all together. It's not any agenda meeting. It's not, we're praying. That's all we're doing. In one of those, we're talking about the power of prayer and fasting, and we're talking about people fasting. And we had a guy on our staff, one of our church planners, who literally felt like God called him to a fast. And it was the first time he'd ever fasted in his life. And he felt like God called him to do a 7-day fast. And it changed his life. It changed his spiritual leadership for the rest of his life. And he wouldn't have gotten that if he weren't just living in the culture of our church. So there's huge benefits to the full-time on your staff. Second model would be what I would call an in-house cohort. This is probably closer to what we're doing right now. And this is, you have a weekly training meeting. So right now, we have 5 guys that are all coming to our location in Little Rock from 9 to 3 every single Wednesday. So they're there for a full day of training. All these guys are working other jobs. They just have figured it out. They've worked their schedule to where they can be there that full day of the week. So there's a church in Denver, Calvary Family of Churches. They do a model like this, and they do it at night. So they do 4 hours. They're doing 5:30 to 9:30 every single week with these guys, 4 hours of training. But all those guys are working other jobs, and they're just committed to it. They feel called to it, so they're coming to do that. So that's a different model. 1 day a week training. The benefits of it obviously are you can do more. It's not full-time salaries here. It is, especially if you do like the Calvary Family of Churches in Denver, you guys are busy. You think about adding a 4-hour training every single week on a night of the week where you're away from your family. It's labor intensive, it's time intensive. So you have to weigh the odds there and weigh the sacrifice. So I would say full-time model, then the in-house cohort, and then the third one, I don't know what you call this one other than maybe the fly-in model. And this is what Fellowship Associates is doing now. I believe, last I heard, Summit in North Carolina, J.D. Greer's church, I believe they've gone to this now. But many of these residencies, these guys are from all over the country. Some of them already have started. Some of them are in their community trying to build their initial core team, trying to reach people on the front end. And they will fly in for 3 days, twice a month. So that's what Fellowship Associates is doing right now. They fly in for 3 full days, 2 times a month for about 7 or 8 months. And they are just packing in the training in those time frames and just covering a lot of things. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, and so one of the things that they're doing that I believe is awesome is all of that training doesn't happen here. So now they've got 4 or 5 other churches that are awesome, great church planting churches. And so, one month they may fly here for 3 days, and then the second time of the month, they may fly to Austin and spend their 3 days of training at Austin Stone. And they may spend 3 days of training one of those times in Atlanta with Dhati Lewis at Blueprint. So they've developed these great relationships where they're able to kind of get best of from some church planting churches. So at one point they had what they called Texas Week, where they would go and they'd spend a day and a half at Austin Stone and a day and a half at Village. And so they're getting to learn from these great church planting churches. So that's part of that model. And that's why I say you really, you can kind of get a hybrid of all these models. There's all the different ways that you can do this. But it's figuring out what works best for you. And you might change it. So Fellowship Associates is a great example. For their first, probably 5, 6, 7 years, they were in-house, full-time on staff. At some point, they switched to the fly-in model. For us, we had 3 years of in-house full-time staff. This year, it's more the 1 day a week with these 5 guys who are all working jobs. So some of it's just going to depend. Sometimes you may even have a hybrid of that. So that's model, which brings us to funding. How much is this going to cost me? That's the question everybody wants to know. How much is this going to cost? So for you to know from us, the programming piece of it. So when I say programming, I'm talking about materials. The NAM, the multiply material, it's phenomenal. It's what, guys, $350 a person? Is that about right? $250 a person. So there's some costs associated with that. We have other books that we give them. They're with us all day, every Wednesday, so we feed them. And we know they're church planners, and they don't eat very well, so we try to feed them well. This may be the one good time they get to eat out for the week. So we'll bring in food. So there's food cost associated with that. As Bill said, we bring in outside mentors. There's costs associated with that. So just the programming piece for us right now, that budget is $12,000. So right now, cost us, I think it's 12 this year, maybe 10 last year. It's $10,000 to $12,000. That's just for us to pull it off. So that's not staffing costs, that's not paying anybody, that's not investing. Actually, I think in that last year, included in that was the money that we used to help pay for their printing of their prospectus and stuff. So that was included in that as well. So that piece is about $12,000. If you decide to bring them on your staff, you guys know about what it costs to have a staff member on your team. So what we were doing when we were doing that is we were trying to pay them the equivalent of a $40,000 annual salary. Now, we only were paying them for 9 months, so if you do the math, that's $30,000. So that meant if we had 2 of them, which we did for all 3 of those years, that was $60,000 that we were investing in them to have them on our staff. Obviously, that's a more expensive way to do it, but you got to wade through that. You also, we learned the hard way, year 1, if you bring them on your staff and if you provide insurance for full-time people on your staff, guess what you have to do for a resident, even if they're on staff for 9 months? You have to pay their insurance. So we found that out the hard way. Year 1, it's like, wait a minute, we have to do what? So we didn't factor that in year 1. Year 2, we did. So if you go that route, then you have the salary piece. Now, the third component is you have to think about, are you going to invest anything into them just for the launch of their church? So our guys, those first few years, we were investing in them, and this is not multi-site. So this is sending somebody to Seattle. This is sending somebody to Denver to plant an autonomous church. We were investing in them $5,000 to $10,000, somewhere in that range. So beyond the first 9 months where we're paying their salary, giving them a chance to fundraise, we were also investing that in them. So just for context, again, as Bill said, this is just kind of where we are right now. Our residency program right now is costing us about $100,000 a year. So, give or take, it's around that. This year, because we're not paying people full-time, we're able to take the amount of money that we had and divide it up amongst those 5 guys, basically in proportion to what we see their need and where they're going. So some of those guys are getting more than others, because of just the needs. So you also have to think, what's it going to cost us to do the program? Are we paying these guys anything? And then beyond that, are we sending them out with anything? So those are kind of the three buckets in terms of how much it's going to cost you. And then you have to think about, are you going to invest in them beyond? So, year 2, they still need money. Are you going to have any money to invest in them? Right now, unfortunately, we don't. That's one thing I hope we can change. That's one thing that I wish we could do more of. But right now, we're saying, hey, we're going to invest in you for 9 months. We're going to cover every penny that you need to fundraise. So here's your shot. Go raise all the money you can in these 9 months. Build as many partnerships as you can so that we can send you out with a whole bunch of people that are pouring into you. So that's how much will it cost. The other question when it comes to funding is, how do we pay for this? Where's this money going to come from? Which is $1 million question. And one thing that I would say is just, man, right off the top, NAM and ABSC, if you're planting here in the state, these guys have money to invest into church planters. Take advantage of that. That's what it's there for. They want to do that. So partner with ABSC. Find out what NAM has available. Now, one thing that I will say about NAM that we've just learned over the last couple of years, do not assume that the answer you got from NAM a year ago is the answer you will get from NAM today. It's just the nature of who they are. It is always changing. So just know, don't promise things to your church planters based on what somebody heard or got from NAM a year ago, because it is always changing. So just, yeah. But NAM is there. NAM is there to help. So, but here's the thing. When we talk about how do you fund this, I think the most important thing that I could say is just, consider building in a percentage. Consider building in a percentage, and then just believe God to grow the overall giving of your church to fund that. And this is in addition to your cooperative program giving. So we, several years ago, when we launched all of this, at that point, as Bill said, we had a ton of missionaries out. We were supporting our missionaries at different amounts, and really what was happening was every year we were having to raise this big, huge missions offering, and it just kept growing and growing and growing as God was sending out more missionaries, and we're looking at that, plus the desire to plant churches and going, where in the world is all this money going to come from? And we made a huge, massive decision to go to what we called a one-fund approach. Some of you guys may be familiar with this, which is basically, we're not going to have 10 different campaigns where we've got the building campaign and the missions campaign and the general budget campaign and then the pave the parking lot campaign, all these different things. No, we're going to cast the vision for everything that we want to do and then just believe for the people to give to support that vision, but knowing that we're going to make the missions and church planting decisions based on a percentage. So right now, for us, what we are saying is that at a minimum, for every single one of our Summit Church locations, so we have 3 locations here in Central Arkansas, at a minimum, 15% of what comes in goes outside the walls. So 15%, and their cooperative program is included within that. But right now in Little Rock, 17% of what's coming in this year is budgeted to go towards missions and church planting. And does that sting when you have other stuff you want to do within the city? Yeah, but man, it's worth it. It's putting our money where our mouth is and saying we're going to commit to give this percentage and to use that for missions and church planting, and that drives the decision on what you can fund and what you can't fund. So, that may make the decision for you of what your model is going to be. So, man, I would really encourage you guys, pray through, ask the Lord, is that the way to fund it? You can go and raise more money on top of your budget. Summit did that for 15 years, and do that. But for us, we believe long-term sustainability, the best thing that we could do is to build that in. So for us, that's kind of the how we're funding it piece. So that was number 3. Funding was number 3. Model was number 2. Number 4, leadership. Who's going to lead this thing? This is practical. Bill talked about this a little bit, but I believe when it comes to this residency, if nobody's in charge, it's not going to happen. So you need one person that this lands on their plate, and you're going to have to make the decision to fund and give that person the ability and the permission to do this. So Bill referenced the moment where our elders said, hey, BJ, we're going to train you to do this. Well, at that moment, I was the equipping pastor doing small groups and adult ministries and the executive pastor. So I was wearing both those hats. So when they made that decision, one of the things that we said was, BJ can't do both of those things and add a residency to his plate. So simultaneous with the decision to train me was the decision to hire another equipping pastor. And so we did that. In that same season, we hired an equipping pastor, took all of that off my plate. So I really think you need one person who's going to lead this, and I'm going to talk about what that leadership looks like. But you need one person who's going to lead this, who for the first year really can commit to give half of their time to this. I don't think if you've got somebody on your staff and you want to hand them the residency, I don't think they can do this just giving 25% of their time. Bill's asked me 100 times, how many days a week is this? When you think about it, yeah, it's 1 day a week training, but how many days a week is that? Well, for me, that first year, as you're developing materials, especially before we had Multiply, is a whole lot more than 1 day a week, because you've got 1 day a week where you're training, and then you got 1 day a week where you're also developing whatever you're going to teach that week, if you can even pull it off in 1 day. And just like Sunday, that training day of Wednesday for us came every 7 days, so we're having to develop the materials, all of that. And then here's the thing that we did not factor in, and Bill's feeling this right now. You spend half a day talking about your fundraising strategy. Well, at the end of that day, you know what happens? You walk out and those guys go get in their car and they're driving home and they got questions firing everywhere, and they get home and what are they going to do? They're going to text you, hey man, do you have an hour tomorrow to help me work on this? And then you get 5 of those texts, and all 5 of those 1 hour meetings end up being 2 hour meetings. And so you end up spending time coaching, and then you end up, this is the 5th thing I'll talk about, but then you end up feeling really, really, really bad because you look up and you realize, oh man, we got that guy that planted 2 years ago, and I hadn't called and checked on him in 3 months. And man, we don't want to do that. So you have to think about just all of the time that's involved in this. It's not just a 1 day week. So I would say at the very beginning, you need one person who can at least invest half of their work week. So you need one staff person who can at least invest half of their work week in this to start. That's best case scenario. You can. Now, the flip side of that is whoever is leading it, Bill referenced this, but needs to understand you don't have to do all the training. In fact, you should not do all of the training. Number 1, because you'll kill yourself, and number 2, because you don't know everything, and you need to get all the other people involved in that. When I was doing the training with Bill Wellens, one of the things he said to me that was so helpful is he said, think of yourself like a university president, hiring faculty to teach in their area of expertise. So you need to think of yourself like I'm the president. I'm the president of this little university that we've started. And I have in my mind everything we want to give them. And then I need to think through who's the best person to give them each one of those. Who's the best person? And then you determine, this was something that he said was so good. He said, don't say, hey, Joe on our staff, hey, can you take 2 days with the residents at some point this year and just do whatever you want with them? No. You need to tell them, I need you to cover this. I need you to think about this. So you're the university president. You're scheduling all of it. You're thinking big picture. I think this is the reason I say that first year you need at least half your time. The first year, even if you're not teaching, you need to be in there the whole time so that you can see. I did that the first 2 years. I was there the whole time. Beyond that, we got to the point where it's like, hey, I know what Bill's going to be teaching. I know what session Zach's going to do. So we're able to do that. So think of yourself like a university president, getting people to teach in their area of expertise. And Bill referenced this, bring in outside people. We have Robert Lewis, we have Bill Wellens. We've had Dave McClung come and do stuff for us. So bring in these outside experts. And then another option that Fellowship Associates has done that we haven't done a whole lot of, but I think is a great idea, is have days where you pack your residents up in a car and you send them somewhere. So one of the ideas that we floated at one point was, do we take one day where we pack all our guys up and we drive them up to Jonesboro and we have Archie talk to them about evangelism? We have somebody, we look around the state and go, man, who would be the best to pour into our guys in this? And then we call them up and say, hey, can we come to you? We're going to do a road trip. Come just spend some time with you. So using other people, and then do not be afraid to use video. I mean, guys, we live in a day where you can get almost anything on video. Every year, when the Exponential Church Planting Conference happens in Orlando, the next week they offer a digital all-access pass for about $50 where you can download videos of every single session. So every year, I would buy those, and the next 3 or 4 months, I'd watch them and go, hey man, we need to use that. He's saying that way better than I could, and it breaks it up. So don't be afraid to use video. Lifeway's got a church planting course. I think they've got 2 or 3 church planting courses out there on newchurches.com. There's just tons, Exponential, there's tons of things out there. So use video, man. I mean, you've got experts out there. The last thing I'd say about just leadership, Bill referenced recruiting. I would encourage you guys, when it comes to recruiting, the leader of the residency needs to own that and know that if nobody else does it, I still have to make sure we've got people in the pipeline and ready for next year. But you need to get everybody on your staff thinking recruiting. So the leader owns it, but everybody needs to be thinking it. Because one person can't do all the recruiting. So you need to have everybody on your staff is thinking, hey, we have a location in Conway, and they've got all these campus ministry people and all this. So, every year, our Conway staff's going, man, but at some point, we need to plant so-and-so. We need to be thinking about this guy or that guy. So when it comes to leadership, I would say, or the recruiting piece of it, one person owns it, but everybody needs to be thinking it. And then the last thing, the fifth thing, is continuing impact. So for us, we have them for 9 months. We do a big send-off day, a big launch day. This is awesome. This is great. We're sending out these church planners. Well, what do we do then with them? Because again, as I said a moment ago, it's really easy for our focus to then turn to the next group of guys that are coming in and to forget about these guys who are now going out onto the front lines. So this is a piece that we're 4 years in and we're just now getting to this. So you have to think, how are we going to stay connected with these guys beyond that? For us, we are in the beginning stages right now of forming a summit network. So summit network of churches where they have full access to everything that we do. So everything we create for our church, every sermon graphic, every outline, everything, every kids material, discipleship material, everything we have, we're going to have instantly uploaded for them to be able to have access to, so they get that. And then monthly, some of the ideas we have are, a monthly Skype call where we have a topic and somebody's sharing about a topic and they all can call in and participate in that. So how do we connect with them? I know Summit in North Carolina, really all they're doing for the guys, and I don't know how many they've sent out now. They've been doing this 7 or 8 years and have sent out a ton of church plants. They do a yearly retreat, and that's really all they do. Other than that, they encourage those guys at this yearly retreat, get to know some other people, stay on the phone with them all year long, talking about the problems that you have. But they're just doing a yearly retreat. So you need to think about what's that going to look like? What will it look like to keep in contact with these guys and to keep resourcing them? Again, we're 4 years in, and just getting to that. So, which brings me to my last thing that I will just leave you with parting words here. Man, just start from the very, very beginning. Just know you just got to commit to do this, and just know you're always going to grow. You're always going to get better. You're always going to tweak it. The greatest moment we got, Bill Wellens was so gracious. He gave me tons of time. He gave me binders. He gave me thumb drives with every material they use. I mean, it's invaluable. I mean, just gold resources. The greatest thing that I got from Bill Wellens was the moment where he looked across the table at me and he said, "You can do this. Just do it." I mean, and he meant it with everything that he had. Hey, you guys can do this, so just do it. And know that next year it'll probably look different than the way you did it this year. But if you just commit, then just do it. You know, Bill said, we've been a part of planting 10 churches in the last 4 years. That goes back to a moment where Bill Wellens looked at me and said, hey, just do this. Because my nature would have been, we got 10 more boxes to check. We got this program to develop. We have all these things we need to do before we're ready to start this thing. You know, well, no, just do it. You know, just step out there and do it, and trust the Lord to move, to provide the resources, and then just know that you're going to keep following and you're going to keep tweaking and changing it all along the way.